Our mission is to advance and defend the rights of pregnant people, no matter if they have an abortion, experience a pregnancy loss, or give birth. The right to have a child, not just the right not to have a child. Right? The right to have access to health care and prenatal care and substance use treatment during pregnancy in a confidential manner so that you can get the help that you need. The right to make bodily autonomy decisions.
My name is Karen Thompson. I am the legal director at Pregnancy Justice. My background is in civil rights litigation. My background is in police misconduct and abuse. And my background is in wrongful convictions. And what my entire career has pointed me to is how the state can both deny people their rights and use their power over individuals to force them into untenable situations, to divide families, to harm the basic rights of somebody to live their lives in their bodies. And I feel like in this moment in our country, pregnancy justice is kind of the tip of the spear. Everything that we do has greater implications both for the individual and for democracy.
Pregnancy criminalization is when someone is charged for actions that are deemed to be harmful to one's own pregnancy, or being charged with murder or manslaughter if you have a miscarriage or stillbirth. This is actually an accelerating trend of pregnancy criminalization. And the reason why it's been accelerating has been the proliferation of these laws at the state, predominantly at the state level, to recognize separate legal rights for fertilized eggs, embryos, and fetuses. And then in the 3 states in the South where there have been judicial opinions determining that in state criminal laws that fertilized eggs, embryos, and fetuses can be considered crime victims.
What fetal personhood actually is the idea that an embryo, that a blastocyst, that a fetus has equal rights to you and me, that they're constitutionally protected. And so that means that if an egg is fertilized, if it's a 2-hour-old egg, that it is entitled to all of the protections that you or I might be entitled to. And that is absurd, right? Because what that means is that anything that a pregnant person does that could in any way endanger, and that is a real scare quote, because what does endangerment mean? Does it mean eating soft cheeses? Does it mean exercising too much? Does it mean that you didn't start prenatal care at a moment when someone else thought you should have had prenatal care? There are a lot of ways that that idea that a fertilized egg has rights can be incredibly damaging to the rights of the actual person who was carrying that pregnancy. And that is not something that we want to open the door to. So let me tell you the story of one of our clients, AV, who is a mother in Vermont. In 2022, she was taking residence in a shelter at the time, and a representative at the shelter, I actually think a better word is an informant at the shelter, contacted DCF and said that this woman had mental health issues and thus was not going to be an effective parent. She was pregnant at the time. And so they called DCF, and DCF actually had what they called a pregnancy calendar on their wall that was tracking the due dates of various women who had been reported out to them by shelters and by hospitals. Our client went to give birth and found out that DCF had already started legal proceedings to separate her from her child while she was in the midst of labor. So she gives birth, she has a perfectly healthy, amazing child, and before she even gets to hug or breastfeed the baby, it is taken away. She was allowed to visit her baby, who was at a foster care, with a foster care family that was over 4 hours away from her. And the meetings happened in a police station. This isn't about the interests of the child, which is what we're usually told. It is anything but the interests of the child. It's about invasion and it's about surveillance, and these things have to end. If I get to define your body and how you move in the world, If I get to search and seizure you because I think someone else or something else should be placed on your body, then all of this stuff is going to impact you. It's not going to just stay for people who are pregnancy able. It is going to expand. It is only the beginning. It is the core of the thing, the root of the root. And so we have work to do, all of us across these silos, to stand up for these cases, because these cases are going to become other people's cases tomorrow. Sadly, ERs across the country have kind of become the site for law enforcement to do whatever they're doing. But what happens when we're talking about pregnant people in particular is that the helpers, the people who are supposed to be there to provide the care, doctors, nurses, they end up being the reporters. So rather than giving the aid, they call law enforcement in.
The latest reporting that we have seen also is people who are in labor and delivery getting an epidural and then getting drug tested and then getting reported to child welfare for opioid use, when that comes from the from the epidural itself.
And so you start to see healthcare workers becoming agents of police. And so everything, again, is precarious. If we cannot defend the rights that people are entitled to, everyone else's rights start to disintegrate. I think what happens often as well is that people hear pregnancy and drug use and like the shutters come down. People think, oh, well, you're pregnant and you're doing drugs, you must be a terrible person and you would be a terrible mother. People are going to judge no matter what, but in truth, what we know is that drug use and having a substance use disorder does not diminish one's interest in being a parent to begin with. But the other point of it is, again, if you have a substance use disorder, the answer isn't jail, the answer is help. We have a federal lawsuit in Alabama right now for a client who was arrested for substance use. She was pregnant and was incarcerated for months. And so it came time for her to give birth. And instead of the jail taking her to a hospital, she was left to labor for 14 hours on a cold jail cell on the concrete floor of a prison shower. She was in deep pain. She was getting no assistance. And not only was she not getting help, but the guards were watching her writhe in agony.
She delivered by herself in a jail shower where others looked on. They did not call the ambulance, right? As she was passing out after delivering the baby, she handed off her baby and she passed out in her own pool of blood. And when she woke up, the jail personnel were taking pictures of her baby while the baby was still connected to her with the umbilical cord. How is this pro-life? How is this protecting babies?
Once you say the state can come in and control my body, that's not going to get better. Once you open that door, it only gets wider. That's what we mean when we're saying that this is about democracy, because everybody should have the ability to be protected, to have due process, to not have unreasonable searches and seizures of their persons or their homes. We have a history that is specific and real, and that history did not include women in the workforce. It did not include women with independent abilities to make decisions about anything. And specifically, it did not allow them to make decisions about their bodies. So if you take away the rights of women to decide what to do with their own pregnancies, it is systemic social control, plain and simple. It's just the path to exclusion from being a full member of society.
So we approach our work with 4 prongs. We provide legal defense in partnership with local counsel on the ground to provide criminal legal defense. We advocate for policy and legal change at state houses and with the federal government in partnership with advocates and policymakers and other partners. And we publish critical research, and we work very collaboratively with allies, with policymakers, with criminal defense attorneys, and even prosecutors. We educate and train prosecutors who sometimes change their minds and change their policies about whether or not to pursue these cases. We bring in expert witnesses. We bring in model pleadings. We have the experience of looking at what is the case law and the statutory law across states. We help prepare expert witnesses. We do amicus briefs. These are the kinds of resources that we bring to the table. If you, as a pregnant person, potentially half the population in some form or fashion, can be surveilled, can be charged with a crime for actions that are not otherwise a crime, that limits your freedom. That limits your ability to fully participate as a full person in this society. And so it's a real danger to just the very structure of our democracy. We envision a society in which everyone, no matter your pregnancy status or outcome, you can make decisions about your bodily autonomy, you can make decisions about your access to health care, and you can have a life with dignity, equity, and respect. The alternative is surveillance. The alternative is being charged for crimes that others would not be charged with just because of your pregnancy status or because you happen to be low income and you had a miscarriage. You know, the alternative is that you're not treated as a full person, that, you know, when you show up to the emergency room experiencing an obstetric emergency, you have to wait until becoming septic before you're worthy enough to have the standard of care that you should be getting.
If everyone is treated equally, if everyone is provided the full protection of law, then we have a safer world for people who are pregnant. We have better maternal mortality statistics. We have healthier babies when they are born. And everyone has a sense that who they are in the world is both unique and individual, but whole. And that's one of those things where a rising tide lifts all the boats. If we all can feel secure and safe in our persons, if we all can enjoy our inalienable rights to be citizens, then everybody benefits.